How I Turned My Wife's Affair into a $250,000 Payday, the legal loophole her boss never saw coming. It's strange how your entire life can change in a single moment. One minute you're a happily married man of 12 years, and the next you're standing in your bedroom doorway, frozen in shock, as you watch your wife writhing beneath her boss in your marital bed. The bed you bought together when you first moved into your dream home. The bed where you've shared thousands of nights, whispered dreams, and planned your future. My name is Daniel, and 6 months ago, I was that man in the doorway. Today, I'm $250,000 richer, single, and surprisingly at peace. This is the story of how I turned the most devastating moment of my life into the financial windfall that gave me a fresh start. The discovery that changed everything. I wasn't supposed to be home that Tuesday afternoon. I had a client meeting scheduled until 5 p.m., but they canceled last minute. Rather than hang around the office, I decided to surprise my wife, Sarah, by coming home early. Maybe we could catch an early dinner, or watch that show she'd been wanting to see. The surprise, as it turned out, was all mine. Our house was quiet when I entered, but Sarah's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I called out, but got no response. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard sounds that made my stomach tighten. When I pushed open the door, there they were, my wife and Robert Klein, her boss at the marketing firm where she'd worked for the past 3 years. Time seemed to stop. They didn't notice me at first. When they did, everything erupted into chaos. Sarah screaming, Robert scrambling for his clothes, me standing there, unable to move, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. "It's not what it looks like," Sarah said, clutching the sheets to her chest. Even in my state of shock, I had to laugh. If there was ever a situation that was exactly what it looked like, this was it. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, please." "How long?" The volume of my own voice surprised me. 8 months, she finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. 8 months. While I was working overtime to save for the vacation she wanted. While I was planning our anniversary surprise. While I was being a devoted husband, she was sleeping with her boss, in our bed. Robert, now partially dressed, tried to slip past me. "Man, I'm sorry. This just happened." I blocked his path. "Things don't just happen, Robert. You make choices. Both of you made choices." In that moment, something cold and clear crystallized inside me. I stepped aside and let him pass. "You should go," I told him. "But this isn't over." After he left, Sarah tried to explain, to apologize, to blame stress and feelings of neglect. I barely heard her. I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. I needed space. I needed to think. And as it turned out, I needed a plan. The aftermath and the epiphany. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. I called in sick to work. I ignored Sarah's constant calls and texts. Friends tried to reach me, but I wasn't ready to talk. The humiliation was too fresh. The betrayal too raw. On the 4th day, I met my old college roommate, Jake, for a drink. He was now a successful divorce attorney, and while I wasn't ready to say the word divorce out loud, I needed legal advice. "I'm so sorry, man," Jake said after I recounted what happened. "What that asshole did was beyond unprofessional. He was her boss, for Christ's sake." That's when the first piece clicked into place. "Wait," I said, sitting up straighter. "What do you mean?" Jake took a sip of his whiskey. "Well, Most companies have strict policies against supervisors having relationships with employees. It creates a power imbalance, opens the company up to liability. If she ever claimed the relationship wasn't consensual or that her job was threatened, "But it was consensual," I interrupted. "Doesn't matter," Jake explained. "The company policy is there to prevent exactly this kind of situation. If her firm is as large as you say, I guarantee they have rules against this." A strange calm settled over me as Jake continued explaining the potential legal ramifications, not just for Sarah and Robert, but for the company itself. The firm could be liable for creating a hostile work environment, for failure to enforce their own policies, Jake said, especially if anyone knew about it and turned a blind eye. I remembered something Sarah had mentioned months ago, a holiday party where she and Robert had disappeared for nearly an hour. Colleagues had noticed. Jokes were made. People knew. What if, I began slowly, I could prove the company knew about their affair and did nothing? Jake studied me for the moment. Then you might have leverage, not just in your divorce proceedings, but potentially against the company itself. That night, for the first time since discovering the affair, I slept soundly. I had the beginnings of a plan. The research phase. The next day, I began my investigation. First, I needed to understand exactly what policies Robert and Sarah had violated. This required access to the company handbook, which Sarah had a copy of on our shared home computer. I returned to our house while she was at work. Sitting at the desk where I once paid our bills and planned our future, I began searching through the digital copy of More Than Marketing's Employee Handbook. Section 4.3, Workplace Relationships. More Than Marketing strictly prohibits romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and their direct reports. Such relationships create conflicts of interest and potential liability for the company. Any employee engaged in such a relationship must disclose it immediately to Human Resources so that appropriate changes in reporting structure can be made. Sarah had never disclosed the relationship. She couldn't have. Robert was the regional director, and there was no one else for her to report to without a demotion. They had knowingly violated company policy for 8 months. Next, I needed evidence that the company was aware of the relationship. This would be trickier. I spent the next week gathering information. I went through our shared cloud storage, finding photos from company events that showed subtle but telling interactions between Sarah and Robert. I reviewed our credit card statements, finding charges for hotel rooms on nights Sarah had claimed to be working late. I even found text messages on our shared iPad, messages I'd never seen because I'd respected her privacy. Now, reading them made me physically ill. Can't wait for Daniel to leave for his conference next week. 3 whole days with no interruptions. R. Miss you. Hate sleeping without you. Getting tired of the excuses. R. Told D I'm working late again. Meet at our spot. S. Each message was a knife twist, but also another piece of evidence. I documented everything meticulously, creating a timeline of their affair alongside company events and communications. But I needed more. I needed to prove the company knew. That's when I remembered Lisa, Sarah's co-worker who had left the company 3 months ago. Sarah had mentioned they weren't on speaking terms anymore, but never explained why. I found Lisa on social media and sent her a message asking to meet. To my surprise, she agreed immediately. The unexpected ally. Lisa met me at a cafe across town, far from anywhere Sarah or her colleagues might go. She looked nervous but determined. "I've been wanting to tell you for months," she said after we'd sat down. "But Sarah swore it was over, and I didn't want to ruin your marriage over something that had ended." I felt a bitter laugh escape. "Well, It hadn't ended. I know that now, Lisa replied grimly. That's why I left the company. I couldn't watch it anymore, especially after… After what? Lisa took a deep breath. After I overheard Robert's assistant talking to HR about it. They knew, Daniel. The HR director told the assistant to handle it discreetly because Robert was too valuable to the company. They were actively covering it up. My heart raced. This was exactly what I needed. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit stating that? Lisa nodded without hesitation. I've got texts, too, from Sarah asking me to cover for her, and from Robert's assistant, warning me to keep quiet if I valued my job. By the end of our meeting, I had copies of everything Lisa could provide. The final piece of my puzzle was falling into place. But I needed one more thing: the right lawyer. Finding the perfect attorney, Jake, was an excellent divorce attorney. But what I needed now was someone with a personal vendetta. Someone who understood exactly what kind of man Robert Klein was. It took some digging, but I eventually discovered that Robert had divorced his wife, Vanessa, 3 years ago, around the same time he became Sarah's boss. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. Finding Vanessa wasn't difficult. Finding out who represented her in the divorce took more work. But social media and court records are wonderful things. Her attorney had been Catherine Jimenez, a formidable litigator known for her aggressive approach to cases involving infidelity and workplace misconduct. I scheduled a consultation, not mentioning my connection to Robert Klein. When I walked into her office and explained my situation, I watched her expression change from professional interest to something more personal. Robert Klein, she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. From More Than Marketing? I nodded. She closed the folder she'd been reviewing. Mr. Harrison, I represented Robert's ex-wife in their divorce proceedings. There may be a conflict of interest here. Actually, I said, that's exactly why I'm here. I believe you have unique insight into the kind of man Robert is, and I suspect you'd very much enjoy the opportunity to hold him accountable again. For the first time, Catherine smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, it was the smile of a predator sensing weakness. Tell me everything, she said. The strategy. Catherine's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We would approach this from 3 angles. 1. My divorce from Sarah, which would be straightforward given the evidence of infidelity. 2. A workplace sexual harassment claim against More Than Marketing. 3. A separate civil suit against Robert for alienation of affection. The sexual harassment claim is our leverage, Catherine explained. Companies like More Than Marketing are terrified of public sexual harassment scandals, especially when they involve executives. The evidence that they knew about the relationship and covered it up makes them extremely vulnerable. But Sarah consented to the relationship, I pointed out again. Doesn't matter, Catherine said, echoing Jake's earlier words. The power dynamic between a boss and employee creates an inherently coercive situation. Add in the company's failure to enforce their own policies, and we have a very strong case. The alienation of affection claim against Robert personally was riskier. Such claims are only recognized in a few states, and the damages can be difficult to prove. But Catherine believed it was worth including to increase pressure on both Robert and the company. Here's what's going to happen, she continued. We'll file the divorce papers first. Then, before anyone has time to react, we'll send a demand letter to More Than Marketing outlining our intent to file the sexual harassment claim unless they agree to settlement talks. Won't they just deny everything? I asked. Catherine's smile returned. They might try, but with the evidence we have from Lisa, the text messages, and the timeline you've constructed, they'll realize quickly that fighting this will be more expensive and more publicly damaging than settling. And Robert? Robert will be thrown under the bus by the company to save themselves. They'll claim they had no knowledge of the affair, that he deceived them too. He'll likely lose his job, his reputation, and a significant amount of money. It felt ruthless. It felt cold. It felt right. One more thing, Catherine added. Vanessa, Robert's ex-wife, might be interested in this development. Their divorce settlement included a morality clause regarding his behavior during their marriage. If we can prove he was already involved with someone at work when they were divorcing, she could reopen the settlement, I finished, beginning to understand the full scope of Catherine's plan. Exactly. And I happen to know she got far less than she deserved the first time around. The execution. Everything happened quickly after that. Divorce papers were filed. Sarah received them at work, a calculated move on Catherine's part to begin the whisper campaign within the company. Sarah called me, hysterical. Divorce? You won't even talk to me, and now you're filing for divorce? There's nothing to talk about, I said calmly. You made your choice 8 months ago. It was a mistake. I'll end it with Robert, I swear. Too late, I interrupted. And you might want to update your resume. Things at More Than Marketing are about to get uncomfortable. The demand letter went out to the company the next day. Catherine had crafted it perfectly, detailed enough to prove we had evidence, vague enough to make them wonder how much more we knew. We demanded $250,000 in damages plus legal fees, citing emotional distress, hostile work environment, and the company's negligence in enforcing their own policies. The response was almost immediate. The company's legal team requested a meeting. Their initial response was predictably dismissive. They claimed no knowledge of the affair, expressed shock at the allegations, and assured us they would investigate thoroughly. Then Catherine played her ace. Lisa's testimony, the text messages, and a sworn statement from another employee who had witnessed Robert and Sarah's inappropriate behavior at the holiday party. The company lawyers' faces went pale. They asked for a brief recess, which turned into 2 hours of what must have been panic-stricken phone calls to the executive team. When they returned, their tone had completely changed. They offered $150,000 to settle the matter quietly. Catherine didn't blink. 200 bars, as outlined in our demand letter, or we file publicly with the court tomorrow morning. They countered with 200,000. Catherine gathered her papers. We'll see you in court. Wait, the lead attorney said. We need to consult with our client. Another hour passed. When they returned, they agreed to the full $250,000, with the condition that I sign a non-disclosure agreement. Catherine had anticipated this and already had a carefully worded NDA ready, one that prohibited me from discussing the settlement amount or specific legal claims, but did not prevent me from confirming the affair had occurred if asked directly. As we left the meeting, Catherine informed me that Robert had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. By the end of the week, he had been terminated. The aftermath. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sarah moved out of our house, and last I heard, was living with her parents in another state. More Than Marketing underwent a very public restructuring of their executive team and HR department. As for Robert, Catherine made good on her promise to inform Vanessa of the developments. Vanessa's legal team successfully reopened their divorce settlement, citing new evidence that Robert had committed infidelity during their marriage, a violation of the morality clause in their agreement. He lost his severance package from More Than Marketing and had to pay Vanessa an additional settlement. The $250,000 from the company settlement cleared my bank account exactly 6 months after that fateful Tuesday when I came home early. After legal fees, I was left with just over $175,000, enough to pay off our remaining mortgage, set aside money for a fresh start, and take the sabbatical I'd always dreamed of, but never thought I could afford. The lessons people often ask me if I regret how things turned out. They seem surprised when I say no. Do I wish Sarah had been faithful? Of course. Do I wish I hadn't had to experience that moment of discovering them together? Absolutely. But the truth is, their affair had been going on long before I discovered it. The real question is, would I rather have continued living in ignorance, building a life with someone who didn't respect me enough to be honest? The answer is no. I also don't regret pursuing legal action. Some friends suggested I should take the high road and walk away quietly. But why should I bear the financial burden of their choices? Why should Robert and the company escape accountability for creating and enabling a toxic situation? The money didn't heal my broken heart, but it gave me the freedom to rebuild my life on my own terms. I spent 3 months traveling, something Sarah had always resisted. I renovated and sold our house, removing all traces of the life we'd shared. I started a consulting business that allows me to work remotely, answering only to myself. The strangest outcome of all this is that I'm actually happier now. Without the constant anxiety of trying to please someone who was never going to be satisfied, I've rediscovered parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I've reconnected with old friends, taken up new hobbies, and even started dating again. Slowly and cautiously. The unexpected connection. Perhaps the most unexpected development came 6 months after the settlement. I received an email from Vanessa, Robert's ex-wife. She had heard about what happened through Catherine and wanted to thank me for inadvertently helping her case. We met for coffee, 2 people connected by the same betrayal. There was something cathartic about talking to someone who understood exactly the kind of man Robert was. Vanessa had suspected his infidelity during their marriage, but had never been able to prove it. "I felt crazy for years," she told me. "He was so convincing when he denied everything. I started to think I was imagining things." I knew exactly what she meant. Sarah had made me feel the same way whenever I'd questioned her late nights or weekend work emergencies. Vanessa and I have become good friends. There's no romantic connection. We're both too wounded for that right now, but there's a unique understanding between us. We've helped each other heal in ways that even well-meaning friends and family couldn't. The final word. If you're reading this because you're in a similar situation, know this. You have more power than you think. Companies fear scandal. Cheaters fear exposure. The legal system, while imperfect, does provide avenues for accountability. Document everything. Find allies. Choose your legal representation carefully, and most importantly, remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's failure to recognize it. The $250,000 settlement wasn't really about the money. It was about consequences. It was about refusing to be a silent victim. It was about ensuring that my pain wasn't for nothing. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't the financial windfall. It was reclaiming my sense of agency. It was the realization that I deserved better, and had the courage to demand it. Today, I'm rebuilding my life one day at a time. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just focused on creating a future that's truly mine. And that, more than any amount of money, is priceless.